Okay, and this video is about the natural business relationships, or NBRs. And as you've been noticing with all of our ensemble modeling and data vault classes, business mapping, we talk a lot about, foundationally, CBC NBR, core business concept, natural business relationship. So in this video, we're just going to get a little bit more into what does it mean when we say natural business relationship. So here's a couple of key points to keep in mind. Number one, these are unique and specific natural business relationships. And I think it's important for you to maybe keep that statement as like a mantra, unique and specific. We're not getting generic, we're not typing. They're business oriented. They connect CBCs in how they relate to each other in a business setting. It's not a technical way of doing it, it's a pure business view. If there's another relationship, there's another NBR. That means it's not a typing, it's just another relationship, another NBR. They're clearly understood by the business. We can talk them through because we get them from the business when we work with them. Their numbers are also bounded by the rules of 7. So again, there's another video you can go to about the rule of 7 that'll explain a little bit more about what that means, but this is also subject to the rule of 7. They are technology and source system agnostic, and again, they are timeless, meaning we should be able to time travel back to 1894. Go to your organization, assuming it was there then. It could be like a bank, which many banks are here today that were here in 1894. And the same natural business relationship should exist in the business there. And keep in mind, that means irregardless of any technology, because we didn't have them back then. We didn't have computers. We didn't have the technology we have today. It should still work the same way. They are not found in sources, is a really good important observation. They don't come from IT or from the enterprise data warehouse team. People working there are technical for the most part, and hopefully also a good part of us more business oriented, but we aren't the ones actually running the business. So we can't come with the terms and the relationships, the NBRs, that the business has. And they're not driven by common data models like the industry reference models. Certainly not, because again, they're abstracted and then they have a lot of type relationships, they get generic. That is not the way the business is actually operating day to day. And again, they're not generic, but they're also not role-playing or typed. So as soon as you have a relationship, a natural business relationship, you should never see a situation where it says relationship type or a role-played relationship. Because what that means is there's more than one variation. Here, because it's unique and specific, another variation means another NBR. Or from a vaulting perspective, of course, that means another link. Let's take a quick look at this example. Let's say then we're looking at the instance-based. In other words, I'm not looking at a class like customer. I'm just looking at the individual Hans. So I can say, for example, Hans buys a Prius. Maybe I would. It depends on if they have turbochargers or not. I guess it's not relevant. But let's say Hans buys a Prius. There's also another relationship here that's called Hans owns a Prius. Okay, now this is again from the instance perspective. It's the instance of a record of a vehicle, in this case the Prius, an instance of a record of a person, and we're looking to those as real life models because it's based on an actual record. Now that can be softly interpreted, right, to the idea of, well, Hans is a customer and there's more than one, and the Prius is a vehicle or a car and there's more than one. So, okay, and the relationships in between that we identified is one is buys and another one is owns, okay? Now that we're gonna get into why that's important because the two different things we're hearing and why those two are important to discern from each other. So here it looks as a kind of an ELM model, right? We just have the customer and the vehicle, we have the two relationship, one is buys, one is owns. Let's take a look at the board and how we can progress this model and why it's important that there are two relationships here. Okay, so we want to take a look as to why it is that now we've separated these two instead of having a typed relationship. Here we have two separate relationships, one called buys and one called owns. So let me draw that for you real quick. Okay, so what's happened here is we have a natural business relationship of owns and one of buys. Now, why are they separated? Well, let's think about it for a minute. What does this one mean? Well, this one means that I can tell you that well, in this case, we were using Hans, that Hans owns a Prius. Now, that doesn't say anything about how that happened. It doesn't say how that occurred that I own it. It's actually left us with a status. A status is just that Hans owns a Prius. And it may be pointing to the particular instance, the VIN number of a certain Prius. But either way, it's just almost like a context about Hans. Hans owns a Prius, but there's nothing here that tells me anything about the event. For example, I might have been given the Prius. I might have stolen the Prius. I might have done whatever. But either way, right now I've got one. That's all it says. It's the end result status when the dust settles. Now this other one, if you think about it, speaks to kind of an event, right? It speaks to an occurrence. This is actually like an active transaction or event that it speaks to. Hans buys a Prius. Now that's an action verb, right? That's something that's actually going on. So it's trying to speak to the idea that, of course, there's something happening here. Some kind of an event is occurring, and maybe you want to know something more about it. It's not just hey, did you know what was going on Thursday? Well, Hans was buying a Prius. Okay, that's just a relationship. But if now I'm looking at this as anything of interest to the business, of course, that means this is a totally different kind of relationship. First of all, can we use buys or sale or whatever as the name of a link and just leave it at that? And the answer is, of course not. Because we already know from this little sign up here that if we're going to be tracking information about event, person, place, thing, or other concept, we're going to need to have an ensemble, the incomplete ensemble, including the CBC. Now you see what's happened is there's a sale event. This is now its own CBC, its own core business concept, that we're going to start to track information about, if it's of interest, about this sale, about this event, which could be the time, the taxes, the fees paid, the registration, the loan or financing, if it's a lease. Is it insured by what company? What's the policy number? Do you have a driver's license? Did we validate that you have a driver's license? Was there a test drive? What date did it occur? Was the car clean? What color is it? There's all manner of information that gets gathered around this event of a sale. And of course, this has relationships to other things. Who was the employer or employees involved? In what store or shop or location was it purchased? How was it delivered? Was it ordered? Was there delay time? Was there status updates? Everything happens here. By the way, none of those happen here. This is just a simple alignment of owns. So let's head on back to the slides. Okay, so you can see how on the onset, it looked like, hey, this might be redundant. We're already saying about the same thing, but actually the unique specific natural business relationship was quite a bit different. And actually, if we go on, and I alluded to this, but if we go on from the idea of sale, it has much more to it, right? Now we can see that the sale also has, as part of its header, the store, it has the employee, as well as a customer. We already knew that from before. There's a satellite, or maybe 2 or 3 or 4 satellites on that sale about the date when it occurred, the price that was paid, the insurance that was applied, your driver's license number, of course, to make sure you can actually drive before you run off with a car. Your insurances have to be checked. There's a lot of different factors that have to happen to make sure we're covered in this area. Anyway, now if you look at the notes on here real quick, you're going to notice what it says is that, right here, the first part ends up being actually an event, some kind of a transaction or sale or purchase or buy, whatever you want to call that, right? And all the associated details and relationships. The one below here is actually the end result. It's a status that we're left with. It's when the dust settles. It's some kind of an alignment or configuration and note, really something that's probably context or contextual about the customer, okay? So this is a very different thing here. Please note that as you're going on to modeling with your organization, when you hear this terminology of something being different, please take into account that they probably, mainly, usually, will be different. And it could be a semantic thing where they are the same, but for the most part, go and follow where the business takes you on the unique specific relationships that you have. Fantastic. We'll see you in the next model.